Welcome to another DragonLance Saga episode. It is Misham Gildember the 28th. My name is Adam, and I'm going to give you today my spoiler of Dragons in the Archives. This is an anthology collection of Margaret, Weiss, and Tracy Hickman's best short stories from the plethora of anthologies based in the Dragonlance campaign setting. I was told by a number of people after I finished Dragons of Summer Flame that I should definitely read Dragons in the Archives before I go on to read the War of Souls trilogy. Well, at the time, I wanted to stop so I could finish out the Lord Soth trilogy. I added on one more book because there was one short story about Lord Soth in it, and now finally we've come to the point where I have to either read this or move on to the War of Souls. I took your advice, and I have to tell you, your emphatic nature was not accurate at all. So the argument was that this is a precursor to the War of Souls in the same way that Second Generation was to Dragons of Summer Flame. That's not true at all. I don't care what people say to you. Once you read it, you'll understand. The only thing that would be a precursor would be literally one short story in it and the interview at the end. That's it. But we're going to get into all that. Basically, the way these run is I'm going to read you a synopsis of the short story, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it, and we'll move on to the next one. After this has been live, I'll put in timestamps for each of the short stories, or reflections in this particular case, because there's a lot of reflections by some of the people who are seminal to Dragonlance as a story being released other than Margaret, Weiss, and Tracy Hickman. But first, of course, as always, I would like to thank my collaborator patrons, the Heroes of the Lance, and invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel by visiting the links in the description below. Again, this is spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled about these short stories that chances are you probably already read anyway, come back at another time after you've read the short stories. Honestly, if you have any questions or comments, that's kind of what makes this fun for me as someone producing this content. Put them in the YouTube chat. If this is after the fact, put them in the comments and we'll address them. But just as far as like the back and forth of a live discussion, it's actually really nice getting them. So if you have an opportunity, awesome. If not, no big deal. We're going to go through this anyway. So let's start with The Best is the title of this first short story in the collection. This was by Margaret Weiss, first published in Dragons of Krynn anthology. And it begins with Gondar, King Frederick's seneschal, meeting up with the 4 best dragon hunters in the land. King Frederick's brother, the Duke of Northampton, lured the king to his keep, then held him for ransom. Gondar and the king's subjects came up with the payment only to have it stolen by a great red dragon when they attempted to deliver it. The dwarf among them confirmed a similar tale, and they are all planning to exact revenge on this dragon, get their money back, and get more loot than they had planned on. No one knows where the lair was until now, however, as Gondor leads them to the lair where they scale the walls, sneak inside, destroy skeletal minions guarding the loot for the dragon. They enter the dragon's lair only to find that he's not actually there, or so they thought. Gondar was actually the red dragon the whole time. He revealed himself and murdered everyone. He no longer has to worry about the best dragon hunters catching him snoozing. I thought this was a great story. It took the entire trope of going dragon hunting and flipped it on its head. Again, this is from Dragons of Krynn, so it was already out back in the day, so everyone probably has already heard this tale, and there's tons of stories like it where the good guy is really the bad guy. But in this particular case, it just built it up so wonderfully, and there was such a wonderful backstory that you really didn't see it coming until it hit you. And then it was just awesome. So I love the idea that this dragon, fearing for his horde and his own life, goes in disguise to collect up the best dragon hunters in the land and lures them all to their deaths. Great story. Super short, super tight, super fun. Lots of good laughs. All right. Oh, here's the other thing that I wanted to bring up too. This is my new office, and so I feel it's much more ambient, and I'm hoping that there's no echoes or anything like that. But I'll try to work out kinks if there are. Just give me a heads up. You know, if coloring is off, if lighting is off, if audio is off, I appreciate any constructive criticism you can throw my way. All right, so the next story is Remembering Dragonlance. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. The next story is Honor and Guile by Margaret Weis, which was first published in Dragon Magazine number 243. Now, this is about three thieves who try to rob the citizens of Solace. They learned that during the threat of a goblin attack, the citizens hide their valuables together, with only the transporters and the sheriff knowing where it's stowed. They say that they saw goblins massing for an attack, and they try to be transportees, but the sheriff doesn't know them, so he chooses a teenaged Karaman and Sturm to join him in hiding the loot. Now, Karaman promises to not reveal the location of the sheriff's questioning, and he says in order to make sure that he doesn't say, he's going to close his eyes so he won't even know in the first place. He ends up giving himself a concussion by running into a tree because he had his eyes closed, the dolt. Raistlin comes to help and needs to get some ingredients for medicine to help his brother, who's taken to the inn of the last home, with the other townspeople. Now, Raistlin leaves with Sturm to go get the ingredients, and they're attacked by the thieves. Raistlin fakes knowledge of the treasure's location and leads the thieves into the bog of quicksand. Sturm insists on saving them, and Raistlin reluctantly helps. They return the thieves to the sheriff, and Sturm and Raistlin have a respectful exchange, which is very rare for the two of them. I could take or leave this particular short story. I already knew, if you've ever read any of the Dragonlance novels, you know that Sturm does not like Raistlin because of the way that Raistlin treats Karaman. Also, he tries to stick as much to the Solamnic code as possible, and the Knights of Solamnia in this period of time are not very trustful. Arguably, not many people on Krynn are very trustful of wizards except for wizards. And so, that's another reason why I didn't really trust him much. But this little story, against his own self-interest, Raistlin helps Sturm rescue these thieves who were only going to kill him in the first place, and Sturm, just being the honorable idiot that he always is, which is why we love him, wanted to, save their lives and see justice, happen in the right way. I don't know. Raistlin tipping his cap to Sturm and Sturm tipping his cap to Raistlin was not really something you needed. Seeing a teenage version of these characters in a story outside of a sort of character arc building tale is really kind of pointless. And as much as I like these characters, this story didn't lend anything to them at all. So it was really just around the hook of the thieves trying to get the money and then the companions winning in the end as kids. It was a little Scooby-Doo. Didn't really need it, but it was there. All right, so the next one is Remembering Dragonlance. Now, this is by Jeff Grubb, who has a short reflection about TSR and his interactions with Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. This did not present any new information that wasn't already in the annotated chronicles or extrapolation of others' reflections of early TSR. So again, we're going to see a theme here. You don't really need it. I feel like it's already common knowledge, and if it wasn't common knowledge, you don't really need to know it in the first place. If you're a Dragonlance fan, like a fanatic, and you're just reading everything, then you already knew this information. If you're not a Dragonlance fanatic, you wouldn't really care about having this information or not, because it's just about him meeting Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm not... Some people are really big fanatics about getting autographs of their favorite authors or their favorite musicians or actors, get pictures with them. I'm not one of those people. They're just people. People are people. I don't really care. I don't know. I've never understood it. And so I've never gone chasing that sort of background intimacy that they're providing with these reflections. So it's cool. It's fun. Not necessary. The next story is The Silken Threads by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, which is originally published in Tales 2, Volume 1, The Reign of Istar. And what we're going to start seeing in these stories is a progression of the Age of Dreams to the Age of Might to the Age of Despair to the Fifth Age. And that's really what this anthology is throughout the years, they're projecting these stories that give you a sort of bell curve of what Krynn is like in order to really round it out with the interview at the end. But again, if you've already been a fan, you've already read these. Okay, so Silken Threads. It's about how the gods perceive the actions of mortals in the grand scheme of the River of Time. It's set in the days prior to the Cataclysm, with the good clerics being removed from Krynn. Akar, a black-robed wizard, is approached by Nuatari on behalf of the Queen of Darkness. He tells him that if blood of a virtuous individual is spilled on the bridge leading to the Lost Citadel, the Dark Clerics in the Abyss will return to Krynn and allow Takhisis to rule in the aftermath of the Cataclysm. Akar hires goblins to kidnap Islamic Knight. Nicholas is the knight. He has a twin, Nicole, a female who's much like her brother. Their healer, brother Michael, is a cleric of Mishakal and is offered a chance to leave Krynn by Mishakal, but is in love with Nicole, though he can't act on it, so he stays. When Nicholas is kidnapped, Nicole and Michael chase after him and come across Raistlin, Orphist, and Daedalus. He's planning on stopping Akar in order to remain the most powerful wizard on Krynn. He uses Nicole and Michael to do it and ultimately stops Akar. Nicholas dies and is reunited with Paladine. Nicole and Michael are left alone in the days prior to the Cataclysm, and Raistlin departs with knowledge of what a twin is willing to do for the other half. I think this was meant to be Raistlin understanding the devotion of a twin, the lengths that twin would go to help support them, the twins being Nicholas and Nicole, but he's reflecting on himself and Caraman. But that knowledge has already been paid forward by a whole lifetime of devotion shown by Caraman to Raistlin. So that was unnecessary. The second part is Raistlin trying to, again, stand in the way of the Queen of Darkness to further his own ambitions. That I liked, seeing that it wasn't just in the War of the Lands, that this is a repeated issue he's always had and he will always follow through with. You know, we saw it in Dragons of the Hourglass Mage, which was really great, and then ultimately in Dragons of Spring Dawning. But you know, the whole clerics leaving Krynn to the Lost Citadel, the you know, actual good clerics, and the evil clerics being able to be taken over if virtuous blood is spilled on that bridge. Bit of a pun, it's a bridge too far. For me, in a fantasy world where literally anything is possible, that's a little too far. I didn't really buy it. All of the good gods are focused on this one place. And they said the bridge was guarded by, I think it was Zivlin, who is a neutral deity. And so as long as the evil was acting on their own will and not being coerced, then Zivlin wouldn't interfere because neutrality, which still didn't really make any sense because all the gods were working together to, you know, pack up the bags and get out, as it were. Anyway, it was interesting. You know, it was a good story. Again, not one that I was particularly drawn to. The next one is Dragons of Ancient History by Douglas Niles. Douglas's recollection of TSR, asking all of the game designers to come up with a dragon-centric game module, or 3, and everyone put theirs together, but this new guy, Tracy, something, as he referred to him, went above and beyond. He crafted a history, 12 modules, ran the 3, beyond the 3, and the novel tie-ins with it. Now, there's nothing new about this tale, but it is nice to hear from another seminal game designer about Dragonlance's genesis. Up until now, I've only read it coming directly from Margaret Weis or Tracy Hickman's mouths. It is nice to see, you know, Douglas Niles, he was already there. He was a senior game designer, I believe, at the time. So to see this sort of new kid come in and just show everyone up, and, you know, sort of shoot for the moon, and the suits, as they called them, the powers that be, the corporate bosses, the overlords, didn't want Project Overlord, as it was originally referred to. But they didn't want, you know, something this grand, and they certainly didn't want to break out into novels. But everyone worked together. Everyone came together and presented it in a way that they couldn't say no. It was too good of an idea. And so this recollection I thought was a little more valuable. So the next story is True Night by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, which is originally published in Tales 2, Volume 2, The Cataclysm. It picks up the story of Nicole and Michael just before the Cataclysm. They're met at their keep by Lord Soth on his way to Istar, asking for water for his horse and himself. They give it, and Nicole is amazed by the true Night Lord Soth going to save Krynn. They believe that he would actually succeed in saving everyone on the and before the Cataclysm struck. Michael knew Soth failed, and Nicole refused to put any shame on the knight, always deferring, like, no, he was a true knight. There's no way he was the one at fault. They ended up marrying during the Cataclysm itself, you know, just between each other and, I don't know, the massive storm that was raging outside. They struggled in the aftermath of the cataclysm, eventually having to leave for Zaxxaroth, which was Michael's home, in search of the discs of Mishakal. Now, we heard this story before, but this is way before. This is 350 years before Riverwind, right? So he believed that they would explain why the gods seemed to have abandoned Krynn. Now, once they actually get to the temple doors in Zaxxaroth, the doors wouldn't open. And there was an old woman outside who I personally believe was Mishakal in avatar form, who was saying that she was just waiting. It wasn't time to open the doors yet, but she would be there waiting, clearly leaning on the fact that as soon as Riverwind came, then it would be time. She directed them to Palanthas for answers, and they believed that the discs were in the Great Library. So when they arrived, they saw the Reverend Son, a heretic priest who worshipped the king priest and spoke against the true gods, and he was building up a mob. They threw the knights out of Palanthas and actually killed elves and half-elves and their children. Fearful of the libraries and discs of Mishakal, Nicole and Michael traveled to the High Clerist's Tower in order to tell the knights to come help defend the library, but they were met by Lord Soth on the way. They fearfully stood up to him about his failure, and Soth blamed Paladine for his torment. Nicole seemed to believe him over the truth, and once they met the Knight of Solamnia at the High Clerist's Tower, they were about to be attacked by them when Lord Soth approached, chiding them and saying that Nicole was the only true knight among them. So now we have Nicole reflecting on Lord Soth as the true knight. We have Lord Soth reflecting on Nicole as the true knight. The knights fled, and Nicole and Michael returned to the library, broke into the library, and were taken to a sort of side room by Asnus himself. They saw the volume of Lord Soth's history and learned the truth as Lord Soth appeared. He revealed that there was a tiny part of him that felt sorry for what he had done, but he was furious to be questioned, so it seemed he burned the book and vanished as Asnus then returned to the room. He opened the library doors, the front doors for the mob, and Nicole went to defend the temple alone, not to allow them to come in and sack the library. As she was being attacked by the mob, Lord Soth appeared and fought by her side. He believed only 2 true knights left had to defend his history so that others could learn from his mistakes. The mob ended up leaving. Michael learned the truth that he sought was not in the discs of Mishakal, but within his heart. And he ended up taking his new wife, Nicole, to live with his mother's people, the Plainsmen. There's a little bit of an end cap on this story that says they are the ancestral parents of Wanderer, who was the grandfather of Riverwind. And so because they believed in the true gods, they passed that down to their progeny, all the way down to Wanderer, who was the only last believer in the true gods, and then Riverwind, who then went in search of the Blue Crystal Staff. That story was pretty good. I like how it tied in with another story in another anthology, which was, a sort of novella within those anthologies. I thought the stories were pretty good. I like the idea that Nicole saw a true knight standing next to her defending the library, even though it was Lord Soth, because she was seeing his actions, not his form. And the fact that Lord Soth, they're just not consistent with his character. Either he's being tormented nightly, but he still embraces his darkness, or he's trying to provide an example so that others don't fall down his path. But you can't have one and have the other two. They're 2 separate ideas. One is he's only concerned about himself and he's wrapped up in his own histories and his own sorrow and defeat. And the other is he's actively working for the greater good of the world. That's ridiculous. That is not Lord Soth. And so I thought that part of this story was a little bit too ridiculous. But again, they're the ones who created Lord Soth. They're the ones that write him. So what do I know? Okay, so the next one is another reflection called They Were Not Yet Famous by Michael Williams. This is just another piece that focuses on Tracy and Margaret's friendship and even states that Michael owes his writing career to Margaret herself. Now, they came to him and asked him to write poetry and ended up, making him into a pretty decent writer, all things considered. And he never considered it. It just wasn't in his wheelhouse until they really came and pushed him into it. I like this idea because every one of us are the culmination of experiences and influence that we have in life, positive or negative. We learn from our mistakes, hopefully, and we're able to deal with and process the traumas that we experience in life to become the best versions of ourselves that we are capable of becoming, right? And so where you are right now and where you end up is going to be a result of all the good and all the bad that's ever happened to you. All of those people along the way who encourage you or champion you or are maybe critical of you help you in the long run turn into the best version of yourself, the same thing that you're trying to do, right? It all depends on how you take it. It's all about perspective. I like that he took that approach with this. Again, this one was a little bit different as a reflection. Rather than reflecting on TSR as a company, he reflected on friendship, and I really do appreciate that. Okay, so the next story is the story that Tasslehoff swore that he would never, ever, ever tell. By Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. It was originally published in Tales Volume 6, The War of the Lance. At its core, this story is about a father, Owen Glendower, a knight of Solamnia, who is worried about his son, Gwynfor Glendower, a new knight of Solamnia. Before I read this, I'll get into it. Okay. This is 10 years after the War of the Lance, and the knights and the heroes of the Lance are convening in Huma's tomb to honor the memory of the heroes and share some stories. Owen collapses. Chrysania explains that he has a secret that's eating away at him after examining him. And when finding out that Tasslehoff Birdfoot knows that it was a secret, or knows what the secret was, but he promised Fizban that he would never ever tell it, hence the title of the story, he ends up telling it anyway in order to save Owen's life. And the story is about how Taz and Fizban watched Theros Ironfeld throw and break a Dragonlance against a wall, sharing that they were not magical with Flint Fireforge. Flint told Theros not to tell anyone about what just happened, as it may be the belief that they are real that allows them to then win the war. Tasslehoff and Fizban end up running into Owen, who was in Human's tomb, and looking for Derek Crownguard. Since Fizban and Taz were en route to the Whitestone Council, they decided to travel together and gave the Dragonlance that they took from Theros and Flint to Owen. So Owen has two Dragonlances that were basically examples of how Dragonlances are not magical and they just break on impact. The three ended up supposedly getting lost, only to run into a white dragon sharing his plans to raid Owen's keep. Owen decides to fight the dragon, and Tasslehoff shouts that the Dragonlances aren't real in order to stop Owen from trying to kill the dragon. This shakes Owen, who is knocked around by the dragon, and the dragon ends up breaking Owen's sword, and he throws a Dragonlance, and the Dragonlance also breaks right on the dragon. He tells Fizban and Tasslehoff to save themselves. He's going to hold off the dragon with the last of the two Dragonlances. It doesn't matter. He's going to fight for his wife, who's in the keep that they're going to attack if this dragon lives. So he's going to stand and fight no matter what. I'm sorry, I just lost my place again. I always do that. He wields the Dragonlance and actually kills the dragon with it, revealing that belief and need are what make the Dragonlances magical. And the magic is within the knight wielding it and not in the lance itself. The thought scared Owen as a father for his son and made him sick, thinking that what if my son doesn't have the same faith that I did? What if he doesn't have the belief in the lance that I had, and then he ends up dying? This is a relatable idea that any father can understand. I know with my son, it's hard not to be a helicopter parent because you just want to protect your children because you love them, of course. But the best thing you can do for your children is not be a helicopter parent and allow them to get hurt, allow them to fail, allow them to experience life on their own terms. That's the only way they're actually going to learn. And so this is a lesson that is being taught here, ultimately, between Owen and his son. Oh, I'm trying to look for his name really quick. Gwynfor. And I connect with it. Of course, I'm a father. You have to understand that. Once the truth got out, he recovered and his son shared his belief in them, and they had a beautiful moment that actually made me tear up thinking about my own son and my fears about him as a young man. Fizban seemed to be more of a twit in this story than ever before, which kind of bothered me, And the magic of the lance being with you and not with the lance is actually in contrast to everything we've been told up until now. Certainly to the game materials, but I do kind of like the idea of it. The reason it's only a Solamnic Knight who can wield it, because they're the only ones with that inner belief in it. But I don't know, man. There is that aspect of it that's dramatically different than everything we've been led to believe thus far. And this is a pattern with Dragonlance, where they set a story in stone by writing it down and publishing it, and then they come up and they either had forgotten or they just outright didn't care, and then they completely change it, just seemingly on a whim. And they keep doing that over and over and over again. And I could understand it if it was always different authors doing it, because let's be honest, we have tons of authors contributing to this campaign world. But sometimes it's the same authors. Sometimes it's Margaret, Weiss, and Tracy Hickman themselves that seem to be going back on stuff they've already written for seemingly no real reason, or they forget that, or, for whatever reason, there's just massive inconsistencies. And I get they have different lives, and they have written tons of other fantasy settings and tons of different game modules, and you can't reread everything that you've ever done. But this is why it's so important to have a story group. It's important to have these sort of base details set in stone so that when new authors come in or writers return in order to reflect and expand on the information, they don't step on their own toes. It has already been published, and we all think is sort of this idea of canon, And it's not a big deal. It's just a story, so who cares? Except that we really love this setting, and we want it to be consistent in whatever way that means, And that's why people were so upset when the Age of Despair led to the Age of Mortals, and the gods left again, And then we just keep getting the gods leaving. It's just really frustrating as a reader to see them treading over their own ground, much like Star Wars keeps going with those, the bad guys get a new superpower world-killing machine, and the good guys have to come and stop it and blow it up. Like, we get it. You can tell new stories. You don't have to do the same tricks over and over again. We do get tired of them. Okay. So the next bit is A Dead Dragon in the Road by Blashfield Black. And this is an 8-step remembrance of forcing TSR to turn novel publishing for the Dragonlance IP and not just stick with game books. They were doing a lot of like choose your own adventure books at the time. Gene knew that it would mean the end of Tracy and Margaret's time with TSR, because ultimately they would develop into good writers and they would go off to write their own books, which is indeed what they did. But she believes that it was for the betterment of fantasy fans everywhere, and I kind of agree. This is one of those ideas that I really appreciate, because as a professional in an industry, you realize that you may not be there forever, and the decisions you make may lead you out of that comfortable position. This is something that grown-ups have to deal with in life, the uncertainty of where your next paycheck may or may not come from, or the terror or fear in some cases of taking a chance on yourself and trying something brand new. It can be scary, and it can be intimidating, and you can fail, and you will fail sometimes. But again, that's how you become a better version of yourself, learning those hard lessons, reaching, and it's ironic because I've been with the same, I'm a junior partner of the agency that I work with, so I've clearly been with him a long time, so I'm not taking chances, but it's still good advice. I'll stick by it. Okay, so the next story is Master Tall and Master Small by Margaret, Weiss, and Perrin, which was originally published in the Dragons of Chaos. Now, this story is about Master Tall, a secret silver dragon, and Master Small, a Knight of the Rose, who are hunting an ancient black dragon named Basalt Black Dragon. Kind of on the nose with that last name. They knew that he loved playing chess, so they set up a tournament in the Bread Bowl area, which is around Goodland, and offered players the chance to win this really ornate and beautiful chessboard if they won a game against Master Tall. No one could. And they sort of set it up where this was, in Goodland and surrounding areas, chess was like a huge game. I don't know why they didn't reference Kaz, because that's the Krynnish version of chess on a hexagonal board. Basically the same game, just with hexes. I don't know why they didn't just go that extra leap, but they didn't, so whatever. Everyone's fanatical in this area about it. And so, you see this really expensive board that you could win just by winning a game. Well, yeah, you're going to try. And the cost to get in is a steel piece. So there's a little bit of a barrier to entry if you don't have a steel or one that you're willing to part with. That being said, ultimately, no one could ever win. And eventually, this mysterious and talented chess player named Blackshanks, who was Basalt in disguise, came and beat Master Tall. Sir Michael, the Rose Knight, Master Small, revealed himself as the Black Knight was transforming into his true form, and the Silver Dragon and Knight attacked. They eventually killed the Black Dragon, then they left the chess set for the mayor to honor the battle. So it was all a ruse about this whole chess tournament just to destroy this ancient Black Dragon, and they did. I thought the idea of this Knight and the Silver Dragon coming together to defeat this ancient evil, that's Dragonlance. That's what we expect. That's what we want. So yes, please, thank you, right? Having it framed around a chess game, I don't know, a little strange, especially when they're dragons playing chess against each other. Now I get humans won't be able to see through a dragon's mirage, but shouldn't a dragon be able to? And I don't know that they can. I don't know if there's any like game mechanic I've just never looked at that says they can or can't, but it seems like there should be some, I don't know, mystical dragon, otherworldly aura that they can sort of get a vibe off of each other, but they don't, and there isn't. So I don't know. I just thought it was a little bit strange that no one had any clue that they were playing against the other. The Silver Dragon suspected, but the Black Dragon seemingly had no idea. Anyway, fun story. The next one is, hold on, I gotta take a drink. I'm dying here. The next short story is Demons of the Mind by Margaret, Weiss, and Don Perrin. And this was originally published in Tales of the Fifth Age, Relics and Omens. Now, I was not expecting this story. I forgot this is the one. This story hit me hard. It hit me so much harder, probably because I didn't expect it, and certainly because of my background as a veteran. I'm going to do my best to get through this without shedding a tear, but I can't promise anything. This story is about Gemel Lathhauser, who is a veteran from the Chaos War, who lost his arm in battle, battling a Chaos minion. He was the sole survivor of the battle and left his sword as a grave marker at the battle site. He's suffering from phantom pains from his lost arm gripping the sword too tight. He's suffering from PTSD from the battle, mixed with survivor's guilt for being the only survivor in the entire battle. He's trying to dull the pain he's suffering from in dwarven spirits, while not in his right mind, he actually turns to beating his wife in order to have her leave him so that he doesn't have to see the reflection of the monster that he's turned into in order to drown his pain. His wife, Jassar, refuses to leave him. She's working to try to make ends meet at the Inn of the Last Home. But because her mind is always on her husband, remembering who he was before the Chaos War and who he's become after the Chaos War, she's not keeping her mind on her duties. She's broken tons of dishes. Caraman wants to fire her. Tika doesn't want to fire her because she knows she needs the job to support her and her husband so that they can actually eat. And if she doesn't take care of her husband, then her husband's just going to die from, drinking, which is what he wants to do. Tika explains that she identifies with Jassar's pain because of when Caraman was an alcoholic. And she doesn't want to give up on Jassar, and she certainly doesn't want Jassar to give up on her husband because Tika didn't give up on Caraman. Caraman wants to fire her, but ultimately keeps her because Tika wants her and understands what she explained. He decides to go help Gemel and takes him to collect his sword and to commissions a special box to help Gemel psychologically let go of the sword and manage the loss he is suffering from. He pretends that Raceland taught him magic, and with a mirror in the box that he commissioned, Gemmel can actually see his other arm in the box, the reflection of his actual arm, and just let go of the sword. And psychologically, that's all he needed in order to let go of the pain of his phantom limb. So I love this story because in the story at the end, no one pretends that it's all fixed. No one pretends that Gemmel is now a healed human being simply because that one phantom limb problem is over. He's not dealing with the constant pain, but he still has the PTSD. He still has the survivor's guilt. And the fact that they didn't band-aid that pain, because it is very real for a lot of people, I really appreciate that. It would be easy in a fantasy story just to sort of like, all right, all safe, all's good, but they didn't. They left it open. They left, look, we're going to have work for you. The town is going to have work for you. You need to work on yourself. Stop drinking, develop the strength in your arm and you'll get more work. But, it's going to take effort on your part. That's how life is. It's never wrapped up in a bow. And it kind of bothers me when some short stories and certainly fairy tales end with a nice, neat little bow. And life isn't like that. These stories are meant to teach us lessons. Children's fairy tales were meant, Grimm's fairy tales, they were grim, but they taught lessons. And we need that as human beings. We can't just have these simple little bows. And it's certainly when you're dealing with issues that are real, with veterans and stuff. So anyway, again, dude, I read this story literally crying my eyes out, like blurry-eyed trying to read the words. It really got me that hard. It was really strange. I did not expect it at all. All right. So the next reflection is Arguments, Anger, and Tears by Larry Elmore. Now, this is a reflection on his early days of Dragonlance as he was the art director and how he focused on the development of the dragons and the individual characters, setting up that rule of whoever painted the character first set the stage for how everyone else would paint that character or monster. And that provided a sense of consistency amongst everything in this universe, this whole Dragonlance campaign world. And I think it's because of that consistency that we love it so much. Another reason why we get so frustrated when they trample that consistency in storytelling, later on. We're like, but you set up such a great foundation for consistency, and yet now you're just seemingly forgetting it or ignoring it or something. I don't know. A lot of the times I understand and I can appreciate that, they're either trying to correct mistakes that were made in others' stories or directions that the product line took. And so in some other cases, they're just trying to fill in gaps because, there's just not the information there. But especially when you're trying to fill in gaps, you need to make sure you understand what's on either side of that gap so that it makes perfect sense. It's not always the case with these. Not always the case. All right. So the next story is The Raid on the Academy of Sorcery by Margaret Weis. And it was originally published in the Tales of Fifth Age, Rebels and Tyrants book anthology. Now, this is an explanation about how the Academy of Sorcery was destroyed and Palin Majir was captured. It starts with Cyan Bloodbane ordering his Draconians to raid the Academy of Sorcery, but leading the militia of Solace to think that they'll be raiding Haven, and then that they're actually going to be raiding Solace itself in order to draw them away from the town. Palin leaves with the militia to face the Draconians. Caraman learns about the truth from scouts and takes the children away from the academy, leaving his grandson Ulin and his love interest and former teacher at the academy, Lucy, to defend it. Ulin is a master alchemist who invents black powder. He sets charges all over the academy to bury the many powerful artifacts contained therein that the Draconians are after. The powder fails to explode as Ulin and Lucy escape through a secret passage. Palin learns about the diversion, returns to Solace only in time to find Ulin and Lucy outside the secret passage, and then Draconians are right nearby and overhear Palin. The Draconians in the academy cast a lightning bolt in order to break a physical lock that ignites the black powder kegs, blowing up the academy. The Draconians near the passage capture Palin, and Ulin and Lucy can do nothing but stand by and watch. Ullin is devastated about his intervention and his invention of black powder and the devastation that it causes. So he destroys his notes on how to make it, and they let everyone believe that the dragons, in fact, destroyed the academy. This is another one of those putty fill-in-the-gap stories as far as I understood it. Because I always wondered, they sort of touched briefly on it, but I always wondered, well, how the hell did they capture Palin? He's supposed to be a badass. And then the academy gets destroyed. That doesn't make sense. It's a place of magic. But even the wild sorcery was failing. We all know why, ultimately, in the War of the Souls. But magic itself was just really inconsistent in this period. I liked how they came back. They filled in exactly why the academy was destroyed, how Palin was caught. It did bug me that Ullin, Palin's son, and Lucy, Ullin's love interest, didn't intervene at all with the Draconians, but I understand you can't always go out dying, fighting. Sometimes it's, especially in a Dungeons & Dragons game, you have to know when to give up. Because there's always going to be, time later for you to figure out a way to escape again. But just fighting to the death is not always the answer. So I can appreciate it in the story, but it kind of bothers me because I know if I saw my father, or if my son saw me being captured by bad guys, well, yeah, I would want them to intervene, We'd have a better chance of getting out of the situation if we could do it. All right, anyway. The next little bit is called Growing Up Dragonlance by Jamie Chambers. And this is a reflection of his love for Dragonlance games and how his father introduced him to it. Later, his meeting of other game designers and authors, and finally, his meeting of Margaret, Weiss, and Tracy Hickman. They invited him to become head of Sovereign Press for the D20 Dragonlance materials that they're going to be putting out, as well as the other games that Sovereign Press was releasing. I actually like this reflection a little bit more because it's about a regular guy who just loved playing the game, who did not work at TSR, did not have industry jobs. He was just a fan, and he broke into the game industry because of his fandom. Kind of cool. All right, so the next story, and really the last actual story of this anthology, is called The Traveling Players of Gilean by, I never know how to pronounce this, Gilean, whatever, by Margaret Weiss and Aron Eisenberg, which was originally published in The Best of Tales Volume 1. Now, this is a story about a dark elf who is torn between traveling to Palanthas in order to join the Thieves Guild, or seeking to join in the traveling actors troupe. The Traveling Players of Gilean leaves a flyer at a crossroads. He comes across the flyer and travels to the performance, which is called Cast from the Light, which is about Dalamar being cast out of Sylvenesty. It brings him to tears. He then tries to talk to the producer, Sebastius, who says that he was expecting him, and that he is in fact the son of the god Gilean and brother to Astinus. He says that every actor who joins must give up their soul to inherit the soul of the role that they play. They are immortal during the time with the troupe, and the elf who just performed is leaving, making an opening for this elf. He reluctantly agrees and joins as a symbol of the troupe. A black lotus appears on his arm, and he feels his soul slip away. This is what Gilean? All right, John. Well, thanks for joining live, man. Appreciate you. I get so much flack for how I pronounce the words. Sylvenesty instead of Sylvenesty. Even Magir instead of Mararet, which was the god Magir's pronunciation based on the person who created the god, but not Raceland Magir's last name. So what are you going to do? All right, so they never name the elf in this story. They just refer to him as elf. And I believe it's because this story is about the different authors of Dragonlance themselves and their experience in telling Dragonlance stories. This is a parable, I think. This is the tradition of humanity as passed down from our primitive ancestors, and it's why we're touched so intimately by events that we are so foreign to, because the human experience echoes in everything we do, from traditional art to storytelling and even design. I think the reason why this is the last story in this collection is it was a way for Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, and certainly Aron Eisenberg, because he helped co-write this, to express why they do what they do. You know, they're drawn to it. And by doing it, by writing it, they actually become immortal in the process. Their words live on past their own lives. And it's just a fact of what's going to happen to everyone. Hopefully you're going to make a mark on someone's life the time that you're here, because again, we all know we're going to die. And through the memory of that mark, through the experiences that you shared, you're going to live forever vicariously through those people that you touched, you connected with, you impacted in some way. It's the best shot that we have at immortality, as I see it. And I adore the idea of it. And this tradition, this very human, exclusive as far as we know it as human animals anyway, tradition of telling stories, relaying histories, inventing fables in order to pass on lessons from our ancestry. It's a heritage of specific to the human condition, the human animal. It literally connects us with every single human that has ever walked this planet, that has ever, been raised, shared an idea, and then turned to dust as we hurl around this sun in this vast, empty universe of ours. It can seem like there's nothing important about any of the random chaos that governs this universe, except our shared experience. That's real. The time that we're together, that's real. It doesn't have to be through agreement, sitting around a campfire holding hands and singing Kumbaya. We can fervently disagree with each other about everything, but the fact that we're sharing those ideas, that tradition, is what it means to be human. And that is what is so important about the human animal. And that's what this is. That's what these stories are. They're just sharing ideas, sharing fables, sharing thoughts and dreams, imaginations. It's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I'm super stoked that they do it. I did too, actually, John, until someone barked at me about it. Okay, and so the final bit of this anthology is 3 groups of questions, one for interviews, basically. One for Tracy Hickman, one for Margaret Weiss, and then one for both of them. It's called Through the Dragonlance Years with Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. They reflect on the beginnings of Dragonlance and the transition from the Fifth Age team to the War of Souls era. I am glad that I took the time with this anthology, so I do appreciate those who suggested it. It is not a must-read between books, as the Jean Rabe trilogy, like it or not, does a much better job of bridging the gap between Dragons of Summer Flame and the War of Souls. This is not the second generation to Dragons of Summer Flame at all. But it does have a lot of really great stories in it, so there's no reason not to if you have an opportunity. Pick it up at your library. It's free. It's great. Let's see. It is nice to get a feel for the Weiss and Hickman taste of Dragonlance through the years, and I would recommend this for anyone who loves Dragonlance and has not read all of its anthologies like me, or anyone who simply just likes their writing. This is not a must read, but it is a good read overall. Not all of the stories hit with me. Some hit me harder than I expected or maybe even wanted them to. But I am glad that I took the time to read it, and I am very ready to dive right into the War of Souls. That being said, that's the end of this review. I do want to give a couple quick notes here. I put out a poll on my YouTube page asking what times were best for live streams if you were inclined to tune into one during the week. I asked that because this late is not really convenient for me. I much prefer 2 hours earlier than I started this one. And it turned out that this was the most popular time slot, and then the 6 o'clock my time was the second most popular. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be giving a review of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition supplement that was just released this past week that includes a little bit, like that much, Dragonlance references. I combed through in the entire book. I pulled out all of the content that's Dragonlance related. I pulled out all the images that are Dragonlance related. I'm going to present them to you in this review. So this is not a holistic 5th edition review of the book because I don't play 5th edition. I don't know the rules of the 5th edition. I don't want to. I don't care. I like 1st edition. I like 2nd edition. I like Saga. But I'm going to give it because this is the first specific Dragonlance called out content that we've gotten from 5th edition. And this is the Dragonlance channel. So, oh, it's no problem, John. I appreciate you showing up. You know, I appreciate anyone's time or attention. You know, if you watch this after the fact, you know, I don't expect anyone to catch me live. So I'm just thrilled that anyone does. And so I genuinely appreciate it. But yeah, there are some really interesting directions that they are taking Dragonlance and Krynn and Paladine and Takesis with this new approach. And as far as I understand it, this is a new approach that 5th edition is taking. So expect that tomorrow. I'm going to do it at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. That's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you're inclined to tune in then, I would welcome you. And I hope that you can, you know, join and enjoy it, if not live, then after the fact. For those of you watching this after the fact, thank you so much. Leave a comment. What do you think of this collection? Do you have a favorite story in this collection? Did any of these stories hit you as hard as that doggone one hit me? Have you ever had that experience of sitting there crying and trying to read a stupid story? What are you going to do? I think it's interesting. I'd love to know what story it is because I don't mind a good cry. I'm a grown man. I'm not afraid to say it. There's something about the emotional release that can be very cathartic. So anyway, I'm not always looking for it, but sometimes. Feel free to email me at info@dragonlance-saga.com if you have any questions or comments. And I would like to once again invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel. And you can pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link. All the links are in the description below to learn more. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. And I hope you join me in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This is Adam with Dragonlance Saga. And until next time, Slán Javar.